All right, man, we are in week 3, and our topic today is going deeper into identity. This is my favorite topic, as I already mentioned. So, first of all, we covered in week 1 laying aside the detrimental identity statements that we hold on to, sometimes subconsciously, but they're kind of in our belief system and they are affecting our behavior. In week 2, we talked about how we can't separate our who from our do, and that is our identity is so wrapped up inside of our performance and the roles that we play and the positions that we hold, that we can't really see who we are apart from those things. And so today we are going into the meat of things, and that is really looking at identity, who we are from a biblical perspective, and who we are inside of recovery. The first thing we have to be willing to accept is that we are who God says we are. Now, we've been raised inside of this environment, inside of a certain social class, certain religious mindsets. We were indoctrinated by our parents and teachers and all of these different things that kind of deposited inside of us and made our belief systems and our identity what it is today. But the reality is that there's some responsibility in that, and that is to begin to examine, begin to look at what your beliefs are and decide whether you want to believe them or not. And this is really, really important when it comes to identity, because in the bottom line, because we are created, we are who the Creator says we are. Now, somewhere along the lines in our lives, we've picked up all of these different mindsets and belief systems. In reality, it is what everybody else has said we are, right? It is what our parents said we are. It's what our teachers said we are. It's what society, it's what a certain book says we are. And we have accepted these, and we have to begin to, of course, shed those. But the first step in this is coming to the frame, and that is the mindset that I am going to believe I am who God says I am, not everybody else. Everybody else has an opinion, they have a paradigm, they have a belief system, they have a frame of reference inside of their mind. And they may have slapped their labels upon you, and you have to recognize that and decide whether you want to be identified by those labels, or do you want to be who God says you are. So from beginning of the book until the end of the book, you will find all kinds of identity statements that really clarify who we are and what we have, and our identity as sons of the King, and all of these different things. But they don't mean much first if we're not willing to come to the mindset that I am going to align myself with what God says I am, and that I am going to investigate and to discover those things, and I'm going to believe those things are true about me. You see, all the evidence in the world is no good unless you're willing to look at it, and unless you're willing to believe it as true and accept God's view and opinion of you. So, in the natural realm, a father plays a big role inside of the shaping of an identity of a child. It usually comes through the forms of affirmation and support, but the reality is that the father was supposed to have a great role in the shaping of our identity, of who we are. As far as our masculinity and our views and our mindsets and all these different things. But when it comes to the spiritual realm, the same is true. That our identity is shaped through the affirmations and through the spoken word of our Father. And this, of course, is talking about our Heavenly Father. And that He has affirmed us in so many ways, inside of the scriptures, and has spelled it out in a way that there's no debate, that there's really no debate about our position. There's no debate about who we are, and there's no debate about what we have. Because of the verbiage in which is used, it's very authoritative and it's very certain exactly about who we are and these things. And so we have a decision whether we're going to believe those affirmations that are spoken about us, and are we going to rise up to our real identity. And this is the part where I'm talking to you about, where I told you before that your identity is a process of discovery, and that it is often hidden from us, and it comes through light bulb and revelation moments. And during those moments, we decide whether we're going to believe what is spoken to us, what we hear or not. And so I find that important to establish right now, because I'm going to tell you a lot of identity statements that are made about you, that are made about us, and that are made about children and believers, sons of God. And it's up to us of whether we're going to grab hold of those and receive our aha light bulb moment or not. And so the first one is this: you are, okay? 1 Peter 2:9. But you are, okay? And when you see this verbiage, there's power in that, and it's not really left up to much interpretation. And that is, after this statement of you are, is the truth of the core of our identity, of who we are, okay? And so he says, you are a chosen generation. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You are a peculiar people. And then he begins to state the purpose and intention of that, to show forth the praises of him who called you out of darkness into this marvelous light. So the first thing I want to focus on is, as far as our identity is concerned, is that we are chosen. Now, it's much different from being an accident, right? The opposite of accident is chosen. And we know that some of us were an accident. I of course, was an accident. I was produced by a conjugal visit that they used to allow inside of the 80s to married couples. My father was in prison. I was the result of that visit, because they don't allow any form of any other protection, during those times. So here I am, an accident. Right? And so we have our parents who may have not planned us or thought to produce us and those things, but the core of our identity is attached to this word chosen. And what this means is that we have been singled out as an object of divine favor. Now, the Bible goes into detail that this doesn't happen because we're so awesome, that this doesn't happen due to some righteousness of our own, that God chooses because he has decided to do so. And so that we have been singled out for an object of divine favor. The next thing this draws in mind is literally a handpicked by some sort of choice and preference, okay? So it's much like being in Little League when you guys separate into teams, and each one begins to pick their player. What do, right? You go through the list, you pick the best player, and then the next person tries to pick the best player, and on it goes. But during this process is a selection that is a handpicked by choice and pointing to a person. I choose you. And so with that mindset and that frame of mind, that is what we are. We are a chosen generation, one that has been handpicked by choice and selected with a lot of care, selected with a lot of deliberation, and most of all, selected with the foreknowledge of God of whether we would respond and choose to him. Okay, so with this idea of chosen generation is the core of our identity. And so any form of rejection, any form of abandonment, any form of issues, right, related to that, can be dropped because they're not really part of our identity. And you can't have a chosen identity and a pauper mindset of being rejected at the same time. And so just having this alone, say, you know what, I am chosen. I am not rejected. I am not forsaken. I am not abandoned. I'm not, this forsaken, abused child and all these different things. Just grasping this identity mindset can cause a shift inside of our hearts and inside of our lives. Because a lot of our pain comes from those childhood moments of abandonment and rejection and insecurity and all these different things. But God says something far different, that you are chosen. You are chosen. Chosen for what, you might ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I thoroughly prepped to tell you what you are chosen for. And once again, it's very authoritative, and it is descriptive, and it's kind of set in stone. So our identity is that of a chosen generation. For what? Timothy says, no man that warreth entangles himself with the affairs of this life, so he may please him who had chosen him to be a soldier. And so the reality of our identity is a chosenness, but it's chosen for a purpose and intention of a soldier. And so when the identity, think about this for a moment, inside of the Air Force and the Marines and the Navy and all these different modes of military operations and stuff like that. What kind of identity does a soldier have, right? And once you begin to accept that you are a soldier, a lot of different things begin to come into play thereafter because of accepting your identity. Okay. And so this is part of our core identity, that we are, whether we like it or not, we are engaged inside of a struggle, and that we are inside of a battle, and that there is a war going on between the evil, between the flesh, and between the world. And we have these three sources of enmity and animosity that war against us as men. And so the identity of a soldier says, I am engaged in battle, that I need to prepare myself, and that I need the equipment necessary to fight this battle, and that I am going to accept my identity as a soldier. And that is one of the realms that we have been chosen for. You see, if we don't have the mindset and the paradigm that we're engaged in a struggle, we're not going to be prepared on this side, but the struggle and the war is still going to come on our doorsteps, whether we rise up to our identity or not. So it's important to understand that. The next one is this one. And this is Paul saying that the God of our fathers has chosen you. This is one of my favorite ones. Has chosen you that you might know his will and see the just one, and that you should hear the voice of his mouth. And so this is the disciples or the apostles talking about Paul and this situation that he found himself in, kicking against the pricks or going against what God was planning to do. And God set up this arrangement for him to be confronted, and he was. And this is the message of the apostles to Paul, saying this to him. First, that God had chosen him. And then he goes into the purpose and an intention that you might know his will. And so part of that identity, part of that chosenness, not only to be a soldier, but it is for the revelation of his will. And that is that we would thoroughly understand what he wants, right? And this only comes through silencing the selfish nature, silencing the mind, putting the flesh aside, and really asking ourselves, what does God want? And so we're chosen to know and understand and thoroughly grasp what He wants in this world. And I find that to be really important because there's so many different religions of the world, and they classify, God is a million miles away and He can't really be understood and all of these different things. But the reality of what I'm talking about is that our Creator has made His will known, and He continues to make His will known because He is speaking at all times, right? And so we can grab a hold of that revelation, and we can really understand what it is that He wants. That He's not some big mystery that doesn't really make His will known to men. So chosen to know His will, and that we would see the just one. We would see, we would perceive, we would understand. And this third one that I really love, and you should hear the voice of His mouth. So we're chosen to know His will, to see, perceive, understand, and to grasp Him, and to hear His voice. Now, this is not some audible manifestation, though if God chose, that could be the case. But this is a inner unction. The Bible says that we have an unction from the Holy One, and we know all things. And that inner unction is this intuition, but it's more than that. It is the Holy Spirit that has decided to take up residency inside of our hearts and inside of our lives. And so we have this a part of our identity as chosen for that amazing communication to come forth. Jesus says this, "You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you that you should bring forth much fruit, and your fruit should remain, and that whatever you ask in my Father, in my name, I will give it to you." So in this part of being chosen, we have this mindset of bringing forth much fruit. Chosen to be fruitful. And so within that idea of fruit is everything that God is. The manifestation of the fruit of the Spirit, which is just a byproduct of the Holy Spirit living inside of us. Peace, love, joy, gentleness, goodness, faithful, meekness, temperance. All of those wonderful attributes that build and strengthen our lives. That we have been chosen for that. For to bring forth production, which is awesome. So moving on, he said, you are a royal priesthood, a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. Now, you may have not heard this before, but you are royalty. And that because you are the son of a king and the creator of the universes that has created all of these things, and that you are a byproduct or a child of His, that in itself makes you royalty. Now, the opposite of royalty, I feel like is pauperhood. And that is one who goes around begging, one that is dependent upon other people for his existence and his survival. And I find that many men desire, or many men find themselves inside of pauperhood. And that is they're thoroughly dependent upon the government to provide, and they're thoroughly in this infant state of take care of me, provide for me, save me, and all of these different things. Not understanding that that may be where we once were. Inside of our addiction is the ultimate pauperhood. That we go down into this pit of immaturity and selfishness and all of these things. But as far as our identity, that's not where we're supposed to stay. And once we begin to grab a royal mindset, That is that I am leaving pauperhood. I'm not staying in that immature state and condition, and that I'm going to rise to the identity of who I really am. And I'm going to rise to that. One example is of that I can think of is through that children's story, The Lion King, right? That Simba is the young lion whose father is the king, and then of course the father's brother ends up killing, I believe his name is Mufasa, right? And begins to take over the kingdom. And of course, he's the dark energy force in the story, and he's allowing the hyenas to come in. He's not creating boundaries or establishing any sort of power. He's one of weakness and caving in, and all these different things that you see inside the story. But what's Simba doing? Simba's on a sabbatical, right? He's out with the Hakuna Matata lifestyle, means no worries, and he's forsaken his responsibility. He doesn't really know who he is anymore, and he's over there eating bugs and acting like a peasant and not really knowing who he really is. And so as the story unfolds, going through the Hakuna Matata lifestyle, that it comes to the point in the fork in the road where he is confronted with who he really is. And of course, in the story, it's in the frame of the monkey, but the monkey is the one who's kind of connected to God and stuff like that. But so he gets this revelation, and he sees his father, and he hears his father's voice, and the father says, "You have forgotten who you are. Therefore, you have forgotten me." And that he reaffirms to him that he is his son. And so he leaves there with the radical revelation of who he is. But this same story is true inside of our lives, inside of our quest, inside of our hero's journey, if you will, that we have to come to the realization of who we are, and that we're living far below our potential. And that we are meant for great things. We are royalty, and we have a royal calling and something very amazing to accomplish. And so I really like that story, and it's really hits the nerve of what really takes place inside of our identity, inside of our lives. Reality is we need to rise up to our royal identity. We need to thoroughly understand who we are, and that if we forget our identity or we don't fully grasp that, in turn it is not really understanding the word and the affirmation of our Father. So this royal mindset has with it a symbolizing of power. And that is not to, when we think of power, especially inside of religious circles, we think of, performing miracles and standing on stage and going kabam and, all of these people falling and all the stuff that is kind of a mockery and a fakery of the real power. But the real power is understanding. Think about this for a moment. If you are the son of a king, and the king is on the throne, and he's ruling and reigning, right? And he is an awesome king. And everything inside of the realm is kind of at our disposal, if you will. And that is that we have access to unlimited resources. We have access to whatever authority, whatever that we need to accomplish whatever God has given us. And so with this royal mindset comes great responsibility, because I stand there as a fully equipped man who has all the resources, and basically what I'm saying here is all heaven at your disposal, right? And so if we have that mindset, think about that for a moment. Like whatever temptations come our way, it's like, hey, I got the strength and the power needed to overcome this thing. Whatever addiction comes our way, whatever challenges that we might face, we understand that we have the resources of heaven at our disposal because of our royal mindset and because we believe that we are the son of a great king. Another thing about this idea of royalty is a nobility, okay? And that is, not only do you have access to the king at all times and this unlimited supply of resources and all these different things, but a prince acts different, right? That there is, once you begin to accept that as your identity, there are certain behavior things that begin to follow suit because of who you are and because of what you believe yourself to be. And so the same thing that happens in our life is when we get this idea of being chosen, when we get this idea of a royal mindset, that things begin to change. We stop acting like a beggar. We stop acting like a pauper. And we begin to rise up inside of our authority, and there becomes a sense of nobility about us. And that is, our character begins to rise to our perception and to our reality. And that is a really important thing to understand. The next one is so royal priesthood, right? In Romans 5:17, it says this: if by one man's offense death reigned upon one, much more than they who receive the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life. I'm going to put this in a nice equation so we can begin to understand it. But the first ingredient is the abundance of grace. And that is understanding God's unmerited favor and how much He loves us and He accepts us and He pulls us into the family, and we are adopted children. I always thought about being adopted in a positive light because, I was an accident. My mother was Catholic. She wasn't going to get rid of me. That saying, I wasn't planned and I wasn't really wanted. But because of religion and religiosity, she couldn't have an abortion or whatever. And so here I am, an unwanted, rejected, unchosen. But there's something about being adopted that is a selection, and that is a I want you attitude. And so I never could really grasp, why people struggled with so much with being adopted and feeling rejected and abandoned by their original parents when you have somebody who personally selected you. Anyways, that is our reality as adopted children, personally picked and selected. So the abundance of grace and plus the gift of righteousness. And that is that God had made a way for us, and He imparted us to the gift of righteousness, that He gives it to us. And that righteousness is an upstanding and a right relationship with Him. And that is where we have peace and where we are connected with Him, where we can know Him, where we can experience communication and His power and all these different things that He has made available to us. So the equation is the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness. And it has an equal or an equation to it equals, you will reign in life. And so the reality is that we are chosen, and we are a royal priesthood, and that our very identity is that of royalty, and that we need to accept that, we need to believe that, so we can begin to walk in it, receive the abundance of grace, receive the gift of righteousness, so we can begin to reign in life. And that has the idea of not being a victim. This has the idea of being a victor. You see, you can't take this reign in life quote and reality and say that there's some pauperhood or victimhood inside of that statement. There's none of that present there. Now, to reign in life means that you as a man are rising up in your authority. You truly believe who you are or who God says you are, and that you are walking that out in a royal, dignified, noble fashion. And that is an awesome, awesome identity.
Paul says this is a faithful saying and worthy, for we be dead with him, we shall also live with him. And if we suffer, we'll also reign with him. If we deny him, he will deny us. So he goes on to a holy nation. Now, this idea of holiness is has been tainted in a great fashion. You know, we think of holiness as someone like a monk or His Holiness, or we have this idea of saints being somebody who performed all of these miracles, not understanding that the Bible calls us saints and that we are to wrap our heads around the identity of a saint. I'll say that again because, you know, it's hard for us to grasp. We are to accept our royal identity as a saint. Now, if this doesn't tell you that you need to get your identity straight before your behavior follows suit, because here's what we do with those things. We look at our lives and go, I don't look very royal. I don't look very noble. And I definitely ain't on the sainthood category, right? And so what we do is we look at our performance to begin to look at our performance and say, you know what? I am not that. When the reverse needs to take place, that you believe in the royal mindset, you believe that you are holy or called to be a saint and all of these different things, and then your behavior is going to begin to line up to your self-perception. The reality is, especially inside of this journey of recovery, that we don't identify with sainthood, we identify with sinnerhood, right? And we could thoroughly grasp the sinful nature, and we call ourselves addicts, and we identify with all these negative labels of the old man. But what is supposed to happen is this transformation takes place, is that I am not that person any longer. That person has been buried, and that person has been put away, put off, and that I've put on a new man, and I've started a new life, a resurrection life with a new identity, with a new heart, with a new spirit, and all of these things. Holy. That is something that is sacred, a sacred identity. That I am the man who is set apart for the service of God. That I have been consecrated, have a special task to perform, and that in essence, God sees me as singular in substance. And what that means is a form of purity. That's what purity means, to be singular in substance. And so when he sees us as holy, righteous, and all of these awesome, amazing things. But the problem is that we don't see things from his perspective. We see things from our pain and from our struggles and from our mistakes and from our sins and all of these different things that our mindset needs to change. If we ever think that we want to change and transform, that transformation comes by the renewing of our mind. And it comes from thoroughly discovering who we are now inside of this awesome, amazing identity. The last one he talks about is a peculiar people. And that is somebody who is different, somebody who is not normal, someone who is beyond ordinary, somebody that is special, and somebody that is unique. And that is another part of our identity that we need to grab hold of, that we are not common, and that we are to rise above the common, and that we have a great purpose, a great mission, a great royal identity, that we are very special and unique. And that's the way that we were created to be. So in all of those, I've talked about 4 different identities, and we're going to go into more and next week. But where in your life are you not believing in this in the spoken word of the Father, where he begins to define who we really are. Which ones are hard to grasp? Why are we not willing to let go of the old paradigm and the old belief system to accept the new? You see, all of this royal mindset and everything that he's establishing here is for the purpose and the intention to be called out of the darkness. You see, inside of the darkness is, there's three words that really define this darkness, but the first one is shadiness, right? It is the place where there is shade, but it is a in our current terms, it's like a fishy place. If somebody is shady, then it's kind of questionable, and so we were once in that questionable state, right? We were once shady. We were once kind of fishy, as far as our character and our conduct and all of those things. And this royal mindset is meant to pull us out of that obscurity. You see, obscurity is something that is just surrounded in darkness. And we are called, our very identity is called the children of the light. And that we are to come out of the shadows, come out of obscurity, and begin to walk inside of the light. And that is the revelation of who he is, the revelation of who we are, inside of this. The shadow, okay? I'm not going to go deep into this because I don't really believe in all the teachings, but I think it has very relevant interpretation here. And the shadow is the dark side of our personality. It is that which, the Bible describes as the flesh, as the sinful nature, as the animalistic impulses and the primitive mindset, paradigms, and belief systems. It is believed to be where rage and greed and selfishness and all of these things are manifesting in the dark side of human nature. And our very identity of who we really are is meant to pull us out of the shadows, to pull us out of being controlled by the flesh, if you will, and pull us out of that darkness. Because we have been called to this marvelous light. That is awesome reality, brothers.